Hey guys, it's Dusty from Pick and Chair Profits. Sorry we haven't been posting many videos lately. Several of us have been under the weather and we're just now trying to bounce back from it. But heard a little Christmas song there and got a little Christmas tree back behind me, and I was just thinking about Christmas and thinking about gifts and things like that. And the greatest gift that any of us will ever have is the gift of eternal life given to us by Jesus on the cross. The greatest giver we'll ever know is Jesus himself, who was obviously born. We celebrate his birth at Christmas. But just kind of thinking about gifts and things like that, I think back to the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 12, there near the end. Last couple of verses, Jesus talks of a widow who gave what was perceived by everybody else to be very little, but Jesus told his disciples that she actually gave more than anybody because she gave everything that she had. And that's a great story. Talking about how much you sacrifice. What you give may seem like a little bit to somebody else, and it may actually be everything you got. So it takes me back to when I was in second grade, and Christmas time was upon us, and the teacher had told all the boys, hey, bring a boy's gift, girls bring a girl's gift, and we'll put numbers on them, and we'll pick a number, and whatever number you draw, that's the present you get. So here we are. We show up the last day of school before Christmas holiday, before Christmas break, and I had brought a football. It was very obviously a football based on the way it was wrapped. There was no doubt that it was a football. And I looked back on the table, and you could see all these gifts, and boys' gifts there were 1 through 13, and girls' gifts there were 1 through 12 or 1 through 13, something like that, whatever. But it was laid out so a boy would pick a boy's gift, a girl would pick a girl's gift, and it would all be good. Everybody live happily ever after. Well, as they start putting numbers on everything, the teacher does, I noticed that my football is number 7. My baseball number was number 7, and I was sitting here going, man, it is meant to be. I'm going to draw number 7. I'm going to have this football, and it's going to be the best. It's going to be, wow, Merry Christmas for me. Well, I keep on looking, and when we get down to the end, number 13 was a yellow truck. And I know it was a yellow truck without opening it because there was no opening to it. The yellow truck was beat up. It was a little muddy. It was a little rusty. But the teacher, without hesitating, she put the number 13 on that thing. That was the last one. She put number 13 on it. And being the second grader that I was, and not very mature, and probably just not a very good little fella yet, I was really anxious to find out what number I was going to get. I wanted that number 7. I wanted that football. And I had a little temper, and I'll go ahead and tell you, if I got number 13, I got some beat up truck that wasn't even new, I was probably going to pitch a pretty good fit. So we go on. The girls pick their numbers. Ladies first. We're being polite and everything, not because the boys wanted to, but because we had a teacher who was a lady, and she felt like we probably should go that way, so we did. But it came time for the boys to start picking numbers. And so we start picking. A couple guys get to go before me, basically almost everybody, because they had all behaved better than me, so I was kind of the last man on the list. So I go and look. Everything's taken except for number 7 and number 13. So I wasn't really good at math at the time, but, seems like, hey, one way or the other, I'm either going to be extremely happy or I'm about to have a meltdown. Not that I premeditated a meltdown, just looking back, I know that I didn't want that truck. So I reach my hand into the little bucket and I pull out the number, and I wouldn't be telling you this story if I pulled out a 7. I'd probably still be out in the yard playing with a football that was falling to pieces. But anyway, I pulled out 13. And I would love to tell you that I behaved honorably, that I behaved unselfishly and gratefully, because I had been given a gift. That wasn't who I was. I wasn't at that point in my life yet. So what I do, well, I didn't get to do a whole lot because right as I was starting to pitch that fit that was probably about ready to make the news, our teacher was observant enough to realize that that little kid that liked to get in trouble, or whether he liked to or not, he always was in trouble. That little kid was about to throw down. So she walks over and she says, "Dusty, come out in the hall." And I'm like, man, what's she doing? I hadn't even done it yet, you know? I hadn't done anything yet. What's she calling me out in the hall for? So I got out in the hall, and I didn't really care a whole lot for this teacher, and she probably knew it, and I don't know if she's still alive now, but I'd love to tell her I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I'd also like to tell her that I'm grateful for the lesson that she taught me, and the lesson goes a little something like this. She had me out in the hallway, and she said, "Dusty, I see disappointment on your face. I see hurt on your face. And it looks like anger is starting to creep in on your face." She said, "Am I right?" And I couldn't argue. And I said yes. Should have been yes, ma'am. And she corrected me on that because she was good at that. So changed my answer to yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I was about to get angry. Yes, ma'am. Or, yeah, it was on. So she said, "You notice there are a lot of gifts on those tables?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "You notice all of them were wrapped up except for one?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Did you ever stop to think why that one might not have been wrapped up?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, "Oh, well, why do you think it's not wrapped up?" I said, "Because that thing's dirty." And, looking back, I was a little jokester or whatever, and she didn't find any humor in it. She said, "No, it's not wrapped because the person who brought that present probably couldn't afford to wrap it up, couldn't afford wrapping paper." And, I hadn't really looked at the price of wrapping paper as a child because all I was going to do was rip it open anyway. It might as well have been free because I was going to shred it. I kind of started thinking, who can't afford wrapping paper? That's cheap, as far as I knew. I mean, cheap stuff. How can you not afford that? And I didn't really realize where she was going with it. And then she said, "Think about it. If somebody can't even afford wrapping paper, do you think they can afford to buy a brand new gift?" And I wasn't much of a man yet. I was on my way. But I was man enough to realize then that story, that lesson was a whole lot bigger than a yellow truck. And my teacher said, "So here's what I expect of you." She said, "I expect you to go in there and I expect you to take that rusty yellow truck that's dented up, beat to pieces." She said, "I expect you to take that thing. And when we go out on the playground in a little bit," she said, "I expect you to play with that thing just as hard and happily as you'd play with your football." And while I didn't have very much joy or Christmas spirit in my heart at the time, I guess, I was going to do what she told me for once. So I walked out on the playground and I'm holding this yellow truck and I'm thinking, man, hooray, yellow truck, beat up, whatever. And then the lesson started sinking a little bit more, and I started remembering what my teacher told me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to see what this truck's made of. I said, it's already beat up, it's already banged up, it's already rusty, it's already dented, it's already muddy. There's nothing I can do to this truck on this playground that probably hadn't already been done to it. I sure ain't going to tear it up. So I walked over to the steps on the slide, and I climbed up to the top of the slide, and I just looked out over the playground, and I thought, boys and girls, y'all about to see a show. So I grabbed that truck with all my might, and I shoved that thing down that slide just as hard as I could shove it, as fast as I could shove it. And that old silver slide we had on the playground, it was nice and bumpy. And at the end, if you wasn't careful, it'd shoot you about halfway up to space. So you come off that last little end part, and it'd launch you pretty good. And, that was a 34-pound first or second grader, Think how far and how high it could chunk that truck, especially with me being angry and shoving it down like I did. Man, that thing started hitting bumps, and it bumped, and it wobbled, and it bumped, and it wobbled, and it hit the end of that thing. It hit the end of that slide, and it took off flying. And looking back on it now, it was probably maybe 6 feet in the air after it flew off the slide, but it felt like, it might as well have been 20 feet up in the air. Truck flies beautifully through the air, hits the ground, bounces, rolls about 5 or 6 times, end over end, just end over end over end. The thing lands perfectly on its wheels, facing the other way like, hey, I'm ready to go. And my eyes kind of got big. I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. But I couldn't let anybody see me thinking it was cool because I didn't get the cool gift. So I went down there and got the truck, came back up, climbed again, did it again, did it again, did it again. And every time I threw that stupid truck down that slide, it flipped beautifully. It landed perfectly. And after about 10 minutes of that, A, I was tired, but B, I was sitting there going, dude, this is one heck of a truck. Well, again, wasn't a genius at that age, but I kind of realized which boy didn't wear the fanciest clothes, which boy came to school dirty sometimes, which boy, his hair wasn't fixed. So I kind of had it narrowed down as to who the person was who had brought the truck. Well, another thing I didn't really think about while I was doing all that, or what I didn't notice, was that boy was sitting over there on the ground, looked like he was about to cry. And he was looking at me, and now that I'm older, I realize he was envious of what I had and what I was doing. So the little boy got up, and he came walking over there to me, and he goes, hey, Dusty, you like that truck? And I said, man, to start with, I didn't know about it. I said, I just didn't know. I said, but after taking this thing down this slide several times and bouncing it around and roughing it up and seeing what it's made of, I was like, this is one heck of a truck. I said, this might be the best present I ever got. And, I was being honest, I liked it. But at the same time, I was kind of patronizing him just a little bit because I knew he was the one that had given it to me, and I didn't want him to feel bad. And he said, do you really like it? I said, man, I love it. He said, would you be willing to trade it? I said, trade it? I said, for what? And he said, for the toy I got. I said, well, what'd you get? He said, I got a little G.I. Joe man. And I liked some G.I. Joe when I was little. Anything camouflage with an M16 on it, hey, let's go, And I wanted that G.I. Joe, and I wanted the little M16 that came with it. And I didn't know what to do, though, because I really liked the truck. And I started hearing that little voice that I later realized was a very important voice. And that little voice said, hey, I think he wants his truck back. And I kind of thought about that for a second. I was like, you know what? Just a couple hours ago, I was ready to fight over this stupid truck. I did not want it. And now I'm about willing to fight to keep it. But there wasn't anything to fight. There wasn't anybody to fight because at that moment I knew what was right. So I said, sure thing, bud. I said, but do me a favor. And he said, what? And I said, if you're going to have that truck, you're going to need somebody tough to drive it. He said, I'm tough. And I said, no. I said, you're going to need somebody like G.I. Joe to drive it. I said, and he's going to need to have that gun to protect it so nobody else tries to steal it. I said, because that's one heck of a truck. And the look on that kid's face when I gave him his truck back, that meant the world to him. But the fact that he got to keep a brand new toy that was going to keep his truck safe, man, he just lit up. And I didn't pat myself on the back. I didn't go tell the teacher, hey, look what I did. None of that. Because I learned right there and then that it wasn't about me. It was about doing the right thing. And it was about Christmas gifts truly being that, being a gift that blessed somebody. And had I held on to that truck, first time I got a football or a baseball or something else at home, I probably would have scrapped that truck out In other words, I would have thrown it somewhere, never found it, never cared about it, never thought about it again. But here I am, 45 years old today, thinking about that yellow truck, thinking about that Christmas gift and how much that truck meant to him, then to me, and how much the lesson means to me today. And as I get ready to go to work in the morning, and it's our last day before we get out for Christmas break, and there are going to be students who get cool things, and students who are probably going to be disappointed and probably don't really understand the true meaning of why they're getting those gifts, and may take them for granted or whatever. But one of our biggest responsibilities as Christians, as men, as adults, and especially as educators, is to take those lessons that we learned and share them with the next generation so that they can carry out what we've been trying to carry out all along. I've thought about that a lot of times. I think about it every day at school. I think about curriculum. I think about what we're being asked to teach, what we're expected to teach. And the biggest lesson that I learned in school, the best lesson I learned in school, didn't come from curriculum. It came from the heart of a good teacher.